There are possibly two big consequences of having an expired driver's license card. The one is that you might get stopped by the police and you're actually breaking the law. The second is your insurance company may not pay out if you're involved in an accident. Anton Ossip is the Chief Executive Officer of Discovery Insure. Anton, good afternoon to you. We've seen the extension today. I don't have a crystal ball, but it seems likely to me that there'll still be problems when the extension runs out. Do you honour claims involving people with driver's license cards which have expired?
Good afternoon, Stephen. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. I think firstly, we also welcome the extension that the Minister gave earlier today in terms of the deadline to have driver's license renewed. But from a practical insurance perspective, our approach to it, whether a commercial insurance client or a personal individual insurance client, is we will treat the client as legally licensed, even if the license has expired, as long as they do have a valid driver's license, even if it's past the expiry date. Obviously take into account the circumstances that we've been going through, the delays obviously brought on through the pandemic. We won't prejudice the client, so we'll treat the client fairly, regardless of the expiry of the driver's license.
It sounds very generous of you, Anton, but I think if I remember correctly, there's some case law on this going back some time, I think 2006, 2007. A driver's license doesn't actually expire. Once you pass the test, you have the driver's license. It's only the proof of the driver's license that expires. That's the driver's license card, and that's essentially what you have to stick to, right?
Correct. I mean, there's ombudsman's cases sort of around that as well. It's really the administrative process which hasn't been done, not the license itself. The client is still, from a risk perspective, legally licensed, and we treat it as such. So it is a principle, in keeping with treating customers fairly, which is an important principle in the insurance industry.
Do you honour all of the claims, or are there some you turn down? And let me just give you an example of why that might happen. Someone's driver's license card could have expired 5 months ago, or someone's driver's license card could have expired 10 years ago. Do you treat those as the same?
Practically, we will look at the circumstances, try to understand why someone didn't renew it for 10 years. To be honest, I haven't come across a case where it goes back that far. Normally it's just, someone didn't realize it had expired, it's gone a couple of months, and the circumstances at the moment, it could have gone a year or so because of the pandemic. So it's kind of, as it goes on many years, it's probably going to uncharted territory, but the principle should remain the same. At the end of the day, the client's licensed, they're just, potentially not very good at administration and getting to renew their license. But certainly wouldn't advocate anyone taking that long.
No, absolutely. I'm sure that there'll be people in government who will say, well, you're helping people to drive illegally, but it's government's problem, not yours. Are you finding that many of the people you insure actually aren't able to renew their licenses? I mean, do people email you and say, look, I've tried really hard and I'm just giving you notice?
We haven't had a lot of that proactively. I think people don't really think about letting the insurer know, not that it's required, because this is the stance that they take. Typically, they would speak to their financial advisor, and their financial advisor would give them the correct advice, that they need to obviously try to do it as soon as they possibly can, but it's not going to affect them from an insurance coverage perspective. So those questions would typically be answered by financial advisors. I'm sure in our dealings with clients, we have obviously over 300,000 clients that we deal with. I'm sure that question comes up often. I couldn't tell you how many times it happens.
There's a much bigger story here around a sort of failure of an aspect of the state. And let me just explain what I mean. The state has a procedure that someone must have a valid driver's license and a valid driver's license card. And that card allows all sorts of things to happen. So if I want to go and rent a car, for example, that's what the car rental agency will want to see, my proof of the license. If I'm a new client and I come to Discovery Insure or one of your competitors and I'm looking for insurance, you will probably quite correctly ask to see my license. It's one of those things that allows you to actually do your business, allows your actuaries to do their work too. Now the state has failed in this, which means that you are under more pressure. I mean, there's a bigger dynamic here about how a failure of an aspect of the state makes it harder for you to do business, harder for your competitors to do business as well.
So look, certainly it's not ideal to have backlogs and to have a situation where we're in at the moment. But I think we also have to be cognizant of the fact that there were for months and months, the offices were shut. It's been open and shut for much of the pandemic period. Processes are drawn out, are more difficult. It's a very physical process. So I think there are some practicalities. I think we all appreciate the difficulties. Obviously we want to be as efficient as possible. And I think private enterprise, is happy to engage and continues to engage to see how we can participate or assist. And I think another thing we welcome is the Minister announcing a number of new centres opening, whether temporary or permanent, but at least for the period of time, helping to reduce the 1.2 million driver licence backlog, I think in Centurion and Midrand and mobile stations in Alexandra and a few others, I think. So I think the right steps being put in place. Obviously not ideal, but I think we all understand that it's a very difficult world that we're operating at the moment with all sorts of complexities.
I'm very interested in how many claims and the impact of the pandemic on the number of claims that you're dealing with. There was a time when people were moving around far less. In a way, the number of claims that you receive could well track activity. It could well tell us how many people are moving around as compared to before the pandemic.
Yeah, it's actually even, we've got even better data than that. We've got drivers, we've got distance data. So we know how much people are driving because we measure distance in terms of our telematics devices that ultimately measure how you drive and are the mechanism to reward people. So we can see, as soon as there's a lockdown, we can see the numbers dip. As people kind of get back to normal, we can see the numbers go up again. And claims obviously track that as well. So certainly for the first couple of months of the lockdown, April, May last year, there was a dramatic drop down, as you would imagine. It started picking up again towards the end of December, got close to about 95% normal driving. And then when wave 2 hit, or phase 2 hit, it dropped down again in January, February, came up again and dropped down again in the most recent wave. So we're sitting probably around about 90% at the moment of normal driving activities. Not hugely down. I mean, a little bit down, of course. That data for us has been quite instrumental in terms of being able to give people, recognition for the lower mileage through a discount on their premium ultimately, which we've been able to use the data for.
It must also have an impact on people buying new cars, which also has an impact on your numbers of new customers.
Certainly, because buying a new car is an important event when people start looking at insurance. Although what we've seen in the market actually is another phenomenon. We've seen a massive shortage of new cars because of the global chip shortage. So vehicle manufacturers have battled to actually get supply into the country of new cars, and that's had a different effect. It's had a massive fueling of used car prices. So we've seen a big increase in used car prices, actually quite a lot of activity in the used car industry, while there's been a reduction in the new car industry. So, if you need to get a new car, people are getting a car. They're just, getting a second-hand car rather than a brand new car. So, we see it coming through our data. The average age of our vehicles has certainly aged. But, from a new insurance, business perspective, we haven't seen a major slowdown in new business through the period.
Anton Ossip, thanks very much indeed, CEO of Discovery Insure. Do appreciate the time. Fascinating. There's a lot going on in the insurance market at the moment, some of it linked to what's happening with driver's license cards.